So far, in the past few years, we have seen God direct us in acknowledging the state of slavery that we are in as we find ourselves in Egypt. He has shown us where we need to be and that how we're living is not good or effective. He has helped us see the unhealthy cycles we're in and proceeds to break them off of us as he splits the Red Sea for us, all while he is walking with us. We see all of this in the book of Exodus, which is also the parallel of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. When we come to him and we cross that Red Sea, this is what gives us salvation and deliverance. Keeping ourselves from returning to those cycles is what we see Jesus speak about when a spirit leaves us and takes and tries to return to its home, or us. We see this in Matthew 12. We see a parallel of this in Scripture with Pharaoh trying to take the Israelites, or again us, back after we have left Egypt or slavery. Now, when I refer to work, I'm talking about working with God in developing character, a relationship with him, and sanctification. In the wilderness is where the work of healing, improving ourselves, and changing of mindsets occurs and comes into play. We can either refuse to go through the work and wander the wilderness until change is done, which is what we see the Israelites do for 40 years due to their mindset of faith or lack of faith. So the old had to die off before the new could enter. Old wineskins cannot hold new wine. Or we can go through the work and then enter the promised land. Entering the promised land is the blessing we receive for accepting the work and dealing with our issues. This is not a one and done thing, but a consistent thing in our life. Each area in our life that we go through the work with God, he will bring us into the promised land. The promised land is basically the land or area in our lives that we are promised if we, through these disciplines developed and God's grace partnering with us, helped this transformation to take root and defeat and overcome the sin or evil in our lives and work towards entering the opposite, or entering the promised land opposite Egypt. For instance, the opposite of poverty and debt is riches and abundance. And I'm not necessarily talking about financial stuff. It could be having a large family and great friends. That's having stuff in abundance and being rich. The opposite of addiction is freedom. The opposite of fear is confidence and boldness. We have not only seen all of this on the individual scale, which is the micro, but also on the macro, or the big picture scale, groups, large groups, nations. Each time we or the groups of people work to overcome each issue. We have not only seen all of this on the individual scale, which is the micro, but also on the macro, which is the big picture scale, groups, large groups, nations. And this occurs each time we or the groups of people work to overcome each issue. Each time we see and acknowledge an issue that we find in ourselves as a slave of, the process begins to get past that which starts the entire process for that singular issue. For an example, for every area in my life that I completed the work from last year, I have stepped foot into the promised land, or will step foot into by the end of the year. Each year, beginning in 2020, it has been one step of the process, but shown to us on two different scales, the micro and the macro. The micro scale, which in 2020 we saw individuals recognize that something is off and begin questioning things, which then caused those people, again, the individuals, to acknowledge that they are a slave to sin and recognize the state in which they're in, which is in Exodus 2:23. In 2021, we find what we see and believe is false, and or the individual began questioning things. Many began studying and questioning their beliefs, which is where deconstruction came in. It's the same thing. Exodus 2:23 through 25. The whole process of Moses being in Egypt. In 2022, we began seeing people break the cycles, which is in Exodus 12:31 through 50. They were leaving Egypt and passing through the Red Sea, which is Jesus, while others kept the cycles going. In 2023, some did the healing and worked through their issues, others did not, and continued in the path of death, which is the 40 years of wilderness. Now again, that was the micro scale. So that was what we saw a bunch of individuals do. In 2024, for those who did the work last year in 2023, and all the areas that you worked, that God gave you to work, you received a blessing or will receive a blessing for that work by the end of the year. You have stepped foot into that promised land. For those who did not do the work, this year has seemed like a curse to you. Now let's look at the macro scale, the big scale. In 2020, we started questioning things and why it operates. And then we had everything with COVID. COVID was basically the start of everything and caused us to look at everything, caused us to really question why stuff is going on. Again, it's Exodus 2:23. In 2021, as a large group began going back to the roots and this became known as deconstruction in Christendom. Many in the world began looking at how everything functions and desired to go back, which is in Exodus, again, 2:23 through 25, the whole process of Moses being in Egypt. That was in 2021. In 2022, we see large amounts of people breaking unhealthy or ungodly cycles, while others continued the said cycles, including family cycles. We saw large amounts of people calling for a change and a stop of current functions. Prices of everything continuously went up. We see this in Exodus. Things got worse for the Israelites in Egypt before it got better. 2023, we see large amounts of people actively working on healing and going through their issues. People began rising up as public figures trying to start the needed change for the upcoming elections. These are the new generation of the Israelites in the wilderness rising up to lead their fellow man into the promised land. And this year, in 2024, those who did the work received a year of blessing. We saw an attempted assassination be divinely thwarted, preventing events much worse. And most recently, we see a second attempt. Those who did not do the work or healing last year, they see everything negatively, or they see this year's events as a curse, which, depending on the winner of the election, may include the results of the election. Now for 2025. As much as I would like to say that things are going to be great and better because of the promised land, it is not. 2025, the prophetic word is battle. We see in Scripture that once the Israelites entered the Promised Land, God told them to overtake the cities in the land and destroy all its inhabitants. By the end of 2024, we would have seen those receiving their blessing entering into their Promised Land, versus those having a difficult year and considering this year a curse. Receiving the blessing of 2024 is symbolic of you entering the Promised Land. So since those who stepped into their Promised Land this year, they will see battles beginning in 2025 and possibly at the end of 2024. The prophetic dreams I received showed a hurricane passing over, along with several tornadoes going through during the hurricane. Remembering how COVID was, and the dreams I had portraying a supercell storm coming before COVID hit, without knowing it was COVID, mind you, this tells me that what is coming will make COVID look like a regular storm. The storm of COVID lasted approximately 2 years. It is my personal belief that this hurricane that will be going over us all will last for a minimum of 2 years, and due to the tornadoes, the longer it lasts, the more difficult the hurricane will be. Just to clarify, a hurricane is symbolic of intense turmoil and chaos. A tornado is symbolic of things and events that seem to be out of control and chaotic, while a regular storm is symbolic of a difficult time depending on how strong the storm is. In 2024, we saw a small split of those who received their blessing and those who considered this year a curse because it was so bad for them. In 2025, and probably further, we will see the split become even more apparent, since we see that it took the Israelites years to take over the Promised Land. Regardless, in the dreams that God gave me, I saw a hurricane go over and then several tornadoes caused by that hurricane. Each tornado was more powerful than the previous, thus making the effects of the hurricane worse and worse. There is always two sides to a battle. In this case, one side will be the ones who are battling for dominion of their Promised Land, like we see the Israelites defeating the cities. The other side will be those who are losing the land, like the nations and people losing their cities to the Israelites. In this case, land is symbolic of how much dominion you have in your life, property, finances, people, that kind of thing. Just like we have seen since 2020, all of this will be seen also in both the micro and the macro, meaning there will be an individual side of this and a societal side of this. If Trump wins, patriots will be fighting to bring the United States fully into its Promised Land, while those who are against the United States, whether they live in it or not, will be losing their land and their life. This battle will be bad and will last many years, but it will turn out good. Like we see in Scripture, it must be worse before it gets better. If Kamala wins, the battle will be the worst we have seen in many decades. Regardless, for the individuals who enter the Promised Land, we must remember that we must be righteous and just in our decisions and allow Him to fight our battles, which is what we saw with the Israelites defeating the cities and nations in the book of Joshua. If we don't function in righteousness, but rather allow the enemy to make us stumble in selfish or greedy ways, it will cost us and others, just like the family in Joshua 7 with Achan and his family's sin. We will be looking back at 2024 next year and probably the year or years after, and recalling how peaceful 2024 was in comparison to what we will be experiencing. I close with Psalm 77. My voice rises to God, and I will cry aloud. My voice rises to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord. In the night, my hand was stretched out without weariness. My soul refused to be comforted. When I remember God, then I am disturbed. When I sigh, then my spirit grows faint. You have held my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I've considered the days of old, the years of long ago. I will remember my song in the night. I will meditate with my heart, and my spirit ponders. Will the Lord reject forever? And will he never be favorable again? Has his loving kindness ceased forever? Has his promise come to an end forever? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Or has he in anger withdrawn his compassion? Then I said, it is my grief that the right hand of the Most High has changed. I shall remember the deeds of the Lord. Surely I will remember the wonders of old. I will meditate on all your work and muse on your deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your strength among the peoples. You have by your power redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw you, O God. The waters saw you and were in anguish. The deeps also trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth a sound. Your arrows flashed here and there. The sound of your thunder was in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was in the sea, and your paths in the mighty waters, and your footprints may not be known. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron.